Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. Okay, back to Munich one more time and the Munich Security Conference where Hillary Clinton presided over a panel on the fundamental rights of women. And of course, the topic turns to the fundamental rights of women. You want to enlist Congresswoman Tim McBride. He goes by Sarah in Congress, the first openly trans member of Congress, hailing from Delaware. This is what he had to say about the fundamental rights of women.
There is no question in the United States that after decades of historic progress on gender equality writ large, and specifically more recently on LGBTQ rights, that we are facing, as you mentioned, a well-organized, well-funded, right-wing regressive movement. And they really have placed trans people at the center of that effort, but we should be clear that the consequences of this anti-trans effort, not only out of proximity, but out of intentionality, will include consequences for women of all backgrounds. Because at the end of the day, transphobia, homophobia, misogyny, and sexism are all rooted in the same prejudice. The belief that one perception at birth should dictate who you are, how you act, what you do, who you love, and how you dress. And it's why threats toward trans people are threats toward all women.
Well, first of all of those phobias and isms are manufactured. Yes, of course, there are some people that are ignorant and would treat someone badly or would make a threat to someone. That certainly happens. But in terms of this being some organized, well-financed attack on the trans community, it's just nonsense. It's disagreement. It's disagreement. It's disagreement that somebody who is a man can magically turn into a woman by saying he is one. That's all. Strange bedfellows, there's those so-called TERFs, trans exclusionary feminists, real women, biological women, that agree with me when they wouldn't agree with me on other things. And they might accuse me of being a misogynist because I'm pro-life and so on and so forth. But on this, yeah, they're not in Tim McBride's camp, interestingly enough. So, of course, it's a little bit more complicated than as presented, but what is one to do when one has such a weak intellectual argument, but to claim victim status? And so that's the running thread between all of those who claim to be targeted by a systemic shadow group of people that have particular phobias and isms, with a very flimsy evidence to support such a claim. Someone else who might have a different opinion than Mr. McBride on the topic is Soren Aldaco. She is an ambassador for the Independent Women's Forum, and she has a case before the Texas State Supreme Court on what happened to her at the hands of the medical community. This comes on the heels of that settlement in a New York case where a young woman who was trans and believed she was led down a primrose path by some of the medical professionals, more focused on advancing ideology than acting in the best interests of their patient. Multi-million-dollar settlement there that is opening up real discussion and possibly more litigation, and certainly has the lawyers at children's hospitals encouraging pullback. In addition to Trump's executive orders, now the litigation encouraging pullback from what I would describe as the mutilation of children. Well, that's what happened to Soren, and she joins us now to discuss it. Thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
So, it's a tough op-ed to read that you wrote in the Wall Street Journal, and appreciate that you did. But just tell us your story.
Yeah. When I was 11, I discovered trans identity in chat rooms online. on forums that were designed for art, but it ended up being more about the role play of identity. And by age 15, I had this identity affirmed by a medical professional that convinced certain family to take that my depression and such was actually a product of this transgender identity and not dysfunction in my home life. So by 17, I was on the hormones, and 19, I was under the knife. I suffered extreme complications with my euphemistic top surgery, which we better know as mastectomy. And when I had those complications, my surgery team ghosted me, and I had to go to the ER and be treated by breast oncology. So that's the beef of my story. But about 6 months after that, I detransitioned. I realized there were better ways to live my life, and that I could reclaim some of that abuse from the medical system, treat myself a bit better.
I mean, just in terms of, how you got, as you say, you got sort of pulled into the chat rooms and this sort of identitarian political dynamic that, that's still afoot, but perhaps was more pronounced then. And the family situation, when was it you wanted to seek out medical assistance, and mom and dad or stepdad, just what that dynamic was? Because I think, parents who may be dealing with this or have dealt with this, I just think it's or are thinking about the prospect, what would I do if this happened in my family? Like what that dynamic was, and who was the first mover, and how the medical professionals reacted, those particulars.
Yeah, well, my mom and my stepdad, the second they were told that my distress was because I was a boy, obviously had reason for pause. They thought, okay, maybe we thought she would come to us saying that she liked girls, but like the idea that she could be a boy, that wasn't even really mainstream. And so they wanted to stop. They asked my dad and my stepmom, who were freshly in my life, to stop along with them. And those set of parents, they started taking me to support groups where they were convinced that the thing to do was to facilitate purchasing me binders, and eventually through getting me cross-sex hormones. So I think that the dynamic certainly was a little bit tense just between those two sets of parents, and with me obviously wanting to decide with these parents in particular who didn't know me growing up. But I think my mom and my the ones who knew they had the right idea that most people grow out of this. By the end of puberty, too, by the time that they're ever 18 and able to make these decisions on their own.
So did you first say you thought you were a boy, or did some doctor, say they told your parents that you were a boy? Who said that to your parents?
The doctor did. I was identifying this way with my friends, but I've said this, that it was almost more like a role play identity. It was like cosplay, costumes, and they play pretend, that it was more like a costume that I wore to school. And my friends kind of did that, right? At the same time, I'd wear dresses and flowers in my hair. It was really just a diffuse identity. The doctor said it to my parents first. And
okay, and again, you wrote in your piece something that I've heard a lot, which is, a generation earlier, you'd just been considered a tomboy and nobody would have said anything, but people are whipped up with this ideology. So you're what age when the doctor tells your parents that you're really a boy trapped in a girl's body?
I was 15 then.
You're 15, and so then you have a quote unquote expert medical professional, and so did that get them, combined with what you thought was happening, the depression you said you were going through, did that get them to then okay the puberty blockers and put you on this road to the double mastectomy and the complications?
For my dad and my stepmom, for my mom and my stepdad, the ones who raised me, they continued to want to pause. But my dad and my stepmom, who didn't know me very well, they I think would have been a lot more cautious had they not had a medical professional pushing them in this direction.
I see. Okay, right. I got you. Right. Okay, I got a little confused with the mom and stepdad. And,
I know.
Yeah. No, I understand. And that's not an unusual dynamic either, which is why this is a really important case. And so I know you're 23 today, right? You're 23 years old?
Yes, sir.
And so how are you? I mean, just before we get into the legal stuff, how are you doing now?
I'm doing well for the most part. I mean, my physical health is a little bit scattered at times, but I was married last month, and I'm really looking forward in my life. Thank you. I appreciate it. So most of that is through my faith and through my just resilience. But overall, I mean, in terms of the trans stuff, that's going to have an impact on me for the rest of my life.
And the complications that you suffered after the double mastectomy, is that when you started to think differently about it, or what was the moment where you said, this, no, I'm not doing this, is not right for me?
Yeah, I tend to assume good faith from everybody, even if they don't deserve it. So for the short period after that, I just assumed, oh, well, maybe my doctors, they were confused and they were unsure of how to act. But over time, I realized, wait, doctors are supposed to know how to act, A, and B, maybe these people were motivated by, say, money, right? When they were so eager to facilitate the initial surgery, but when it came came down to the complications, and they would have to maybe put the medical care out free, they were nowhere to be found. That really tripped me up, and in combination with what I was learning in school about how role models are important to our formation of self and the way we think about ourselves, I thought, okay, look, my childhood affected the way I am now. Those chat rooms affected the way I am now. My dad being disabled affected the way I am now, and that it really fell apart shortly after.
Yeah, your biological father being disabled, right? And then, so you sought a relationship with your stepfather, and the stepfather and the biological mom were the ones who were more persuaded by the doctors than your biological dad and your stepmom.
Vice versa, but yes.
Oh, vice versa. Okay, see, I still can't get it
so
straight in my head.
confusing.
Okay. So all right. Well, so then, but okay, I got you. But so then, what is the relationship like with both sets of parents now?
It was really strained with my mom. I'll just go ahead and frame it in terms of mom and dad, right? Biological. It was really strained with my mom for a long time during my transition, and I actually have a great relationship with her and my stepdad today. I accept them in the way I've tried to accept myself, as imperfect yet redeemable. With my dad and my stepmom, the ones who facilitated my transition, I don't talk to them today. I try to keep contact with my sister, who is, I believe she's 13 now. But it's just, I think it's really hard for them to take a step back and sit with the fact that they facilitated this harm. And that's something we're going to have to grapple with as more and more kids come out of transition, right? That the parents are never going to want to, it's not even never going to want, it's going to be really hard for them to realize maybe they caused their kid harm.
Yeah, I mean it's really an important point. We've talked about this before in these cases. We've talked about it with Chloe Cole and others too, where it's just like the parents become almost the zealots with respect to this, because they can't bring themselves to admit that they participated in harming their child. And I can understand, why you think you're doing what's in best interest. You want to give people, as you said, the belief that they're starting from a place of good faith, what they think is best for their kids, and they just get tunnel vision. But it's just, I'm not surprised to hear that it's very hard for people to admit they made such a horrific mistake, because of course it did harm to their child.
Yeah, it's hard, but so necessary.
Yeah. Okay, well, so tell us about this, because your this case that you have before the Texas State Supreme Court is really important too, because part of it will define the term malpractice, because you have a statute of limitations issue with going after the medical professionals that did this to you, and this is being litigated before the Supreme Court there in Texas. So tell us about that.
Yeah, well, from our perspective, we have no issue with the statute of limitations, but what's being argued by the defense is that the statute of limitations began when the therapist who authorized my mastectomy wrote the letter. We say that harm couldn't have happened until the surgery, right? A letter alone might have been fraudulent, but it didn't actually cause me harm until I went under the knife. And what's novel about this particular issue is most of the time the harm and the act are the same. If a surgeon leaves an inside of you during surgery, it's pretty straightforward. The harm and the act occurred one along with one another. But in the case of a letter and a surgery to authorize, those happen months apart, and the limitations fell somewhere between.
Right, and so that and it's also a novel claim in the sense, although the New York case is somewhat precedential here, in the sense that the surgery was, successfully did what it was designed to do, as opposed to traditional malpractice cases, but it should have never been done, and that's the thrust of the claim, right?
Yeah, for the most part. I think what's interesting about my specific situation is In terms of the letter that authorized the surgery, that you're correct. Absolutely was just standard, quote unquote, for this area of medicine. However, I also suffered complications on top of that related to the fact that they used a drain-free procedure instead of the typical drain procedure we know.
Now, these doctors that you dealt with and these institutions, that the hospitals you dealt with, are they still doing trans surgeries on minors?
Oh, that's hard to say. I mean, I would hope not, right? Because even before the executive orders, we banned it here in the state of Texas in 2023. Right. I know for a fact they're still doing surgeries on vulnerable people. That's actually all the Crane Center where I had my mastectomy. It's all they do.
So for somebody that started being quote unquote being trans in when they were a minor, but maybe didn't get some of the procedures until they're a teenager, young adult. I mean, that's still a huge problem because they put you on this continuum that inevitably leads to this harm.
Yes.
And so the case has been presented to the Texas Supreme Court. When do you expect to hear back? Do you have any idea?
Well, I would hope very soon. They can do take as little as 2 months, but it could take as many as 9, 10 months. And so we're just going to have to keep our eyes and ears out, but we don't know for sure when we'll hear back.
Okay. She is Soren Aldaco. She's an ambassador for the Independent Women's Forum. Do read her piece. Very good. What I Suffer Being Transgender, Wall Street Journal. I'll post it on X as well, and we'll be following her case. Soren, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck before the Texas State Supreme Court.
Thanks, Dan.
And Soren joined us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
This is the morning show more Chicago radio listeners are choosing. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Hello, can I have your attention, please? My name is Hugh McKenzie, and I'm a devout